Hey everyone, welcome to the very first video edition of The Futurist, hopefully the first of many. I'm kicking off this new series with a very special interview with Dr. Dorothy Maxwell. She's the author of Valuing Natural Capital. She's one of the founding members of the Sustainable Business Group, and she's currently head of sustainability at Brown Thomas and Arnotts. Dorothy has a wealth of experience over the last 20 years. She's worked with the likes of Nike and Walmart, and I can't wait to talk to her today. Enjoy. Dorothy, thank you so much for joining me today from Fox Rock. I have so much that I want to talk to you about, but I think really in terms of where you are working now, I think that's a great place to start. You are the head of sustainability for Brown Thomas and Arnotts, and I think when I was growing up, if I'd known that there was such a job, I would be in a completely different career right now. It sounds like such a dream position, but I'd love for you to explain to people who maybe didn't even know that that was a career choice, what it is and what you do for the two companies.
Yeah, no problem at all. So hi, Joe, and it's fantastic to be here. And a head of sustainability job in a business and in Brown Thomas and Arnotts, it's about developing the policy and the strategy and then implementing it. So, for example, the way we talk about it in Brown Thomas and Arnotts is we are very much immersed in integrating sustainability in how we work, but particularly what we buy and what we sell to customers. And it's really interesting. In January, we did a really big survey with all our customers. And whatever way you look at the results, over 80% of them told us that sustainability is really important to their purchasing decisions. So that shows how high the awareness is in Ireland. So as a role and as a career, a lot of businesses have this nowadays. But in terms of the day-to-day and the sort of things that we're doing, I think the thing that I'm most proud of is last year we launched what we call the Sustainable Edit. So this basically is an edit. You go onto the Brown Thomas website or the Arnott's website, and it is sustainable products. So it's sustainable beauty, sustainable fashion, sustainable living, and also sustainable food, gifting kind of products. And the whole idea is we've got about 120 brands there now, over about 1,500 products. It's about making it easy for the customer to shop sustainably. So you still have the same extraordinary products you'd expect from Brown Thomas or Arnott's, but their sustainability credentials meet third-party standards. So absolutely no greenwash, which is a real problem nowadays. It's about really credible stuff. And for example, the dress I'm wearing is from a beautiful brand that we have in Brown Thomas. It's a Danish brand called Gani. And just to give you an example, the kind of things we look for, so it could be for a fashion product that you're using low impact materials. So this dress is actually made from recycled polyester, and it is certified to a scheme called the Global Recycling Standard. So we look for that. We look for things to be certified because honestly, if they're not, you have no proof, and that's incredibly important nowadays. Also, you could have fashion maybe that has organic cotton. Children's clothing that has organic cotton is really big nowadays. And then beauty, we have massive range that is all about cruelty-free beauty, low-impact materials, paraben-free, and so forth, organic certified contents. So that's the whole idea behind it, and I'm super proud of that. And then on the sort of behind-the-scenes side of things, what typically I would do in my job is we've moved to things like 100% green electricity, so wind power, so we source our day-to-day electricity from. If you order a product from Brown Thomas, it will be delivered to you in a zero emissions vehicle, so completely electric vehicle. That's in Dublin at the moment. We'll have all the other cities sorted out by the end of the year. So all of those kind of things also are happening behind the scenes, eliminating single-use plastics. We've gotten rid of everything like wet wipes in our beauty halls, cotton buds that are single-use. You will not find a single-use water bottle if you go into any of the restaurants in Brown Thomas or Arnott's. So yeah, there are some examples.
That's incredible. And you've touched on so many things up there that are great, especially the fact that when you have an edit on the website, it does just make life so simple for people. I think up until the last couple of years, it was a really hard work for people to find things, find the products, and products that were not only sustainable and ethical, but also worked really well and were really beautiful. Like nobody would know from looking at your dress that that was how it was made. And that's, I think, one of the great developments that's happened. So you're doing all this amazing work with them. Can I ask, because you've had such an incredible, varied career, which we're going to get into later, but I can tell from your career trajectory that retail is something that you've always been super interested in. And I wonder, why is it continually a focus for you? Is it because it's that great way of getting to a customer and to a person through their daily lives? Is that what's drawn you to retail?
Well, that's a really great question. I think for me, I'm a little bit of a hybrid. I'm very interested in the big picture and strategy, but I also really like to get stuff done. And retail as a sector is terrific at that. And we have amazing team members that really get behind these things, and you get great value out of really seeing things achieved. I think the thing that brought me into it, first of all, though, as a sustainability professional, is that I truly believe, and the evidence is really clear, that consumer products, the things we love to buy every day, can have a really big footprint on people and planet. But exactly as you just described, in the last 5 years, we have seen so many products that really reduce that, really change that, and they're still beautiful, they're still at the right price. You know, you can really do that. So I think retail has shown a lot of improvements. It still has a ton to do, there's no doubt about it, and that's very satisfying.
Again, in terms of the business side of things, meeting sustainability, when you were talking there about the range of clean beauty, I had read a statistic during the week and I took note of it because I knew I was going to be talking to you, but the statistic said that basically clean beauty is up 11%, even though beauty globally is down 14%. So is it time for people, whatever their ethics are, to really start looking at crunching the numbers and how really ethical, clean, sustainable products are actually better for business too? Like, it's a good way to draw in a new kind of customer.
Absolutely. And if you look across the statistics of ethical and sustainable products, beauty, truly sustainable beauty, it's one of the biggest parts of it, as well as food. So I think what people put on themselves and what people take into themselves, like food, they have been the two that people really want to make sure they're genuinely good for you and credible from a sustainability perspective. But the other sectors are growing too, the fashion and so forth.
The fashion has been, it seems definitely to been a little bit slower on the uptake. Why do you think that is? Is it just a kind of a disconnect? People don't really need to think about it when it's just something that they're putting on in the morning?
Yeah, I think that, when you look at the supply chain of fashion, it's so global. It has so many different challenges within it. And there's been a real desire and a big push on the fashion industry to resolve those over definitely the last 5 years. But it's, there's been, I mean, I'm working in sustainability 20 years and within the fashion sector, and these things have been focused on that length of time and before I'm involved in it. But it's really only in that last 5 years that we've really started to make real progress. So the issues are complicated, and perhaps the drivers weren't enough. But now the customer has helped a lot, because if the consumer wants something, that also helps businesses to be able to respond, whether you're a brand or a retailer. And as I said to you, over 80% of our Brown Thomas Arnotts customers desiring sustainable products, that's a really strong message. So that's helped a lot to move this faster.
That's an amazing statistic. And yeah, you're great. It's great to bring it back to that, because that just emboldens me and inspires me so much to think that that many people are now seriously engaged. When you got back that survey, were you like doing a little happy dance? Because I'm sure throughout your career, you felt like you were probably beating down the door and wondering if anyone was listening. Does it feel like you're at a stage now in your career and in your life where people finally get it and you don't have to do the hard sell?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of people talk about this sustainability career, you're constantly on an uphill struggle, but that definitely has decreased in recent years, which is great. Um, I think, the climate change emergency, biodiversity emergency, now with COVID-19 and the whole interlinks with, how more easily human beings can track things and all these kind of things, all of this is in our face. So the awareness is there. Most people are aware of it and they're looking for better options.
Mm. So managing Brown Thomas and Arnotts, they're two Dublin and Irish, I guess, legendary stores. Do you have different like brands for each store? Do you find that's quite a different customer in terms of like the price points of sustainable items that they want, the kind of beauty they want? I'd be fascinated to know how you go about choosing which goes where.
Yeah, a little bit out of my space. I mean, there's amazing experts in the business that decide what would go where. But for example, with beauty and our wonderful teams who buy beauty for Brown Thomas and Arnotts, they work together. But you'll have an Arnott's customer who may desire something different from a Brown Thomas customer. So there's a science and probably black art in that decision making of what goes into one store versus another. And similarly with the fashion as well. But Arnott's is an amazing store. Every time that pre-COVID-19 I'm going into it, we've been putting so much investment in it. You can just see it changing before your eyes, and it's amazing from the products through to the store itself. It's really becoming such an exciting place to shop in Dublin.
Are there any, and maybe you can share them, maybe you can't, and as you mentioned COVID-19 there, maybe things are kind of up in the air, but what are the kind of future things that you'd like to implement in the stores? I mean, I didn't realize about the zero emissions deliveries. That's fantastic to know. But are there other things that you're hoping that you'll be able to change over the next year or two, in terms of the servicing or the stores themselves?
Definitely. I think the thing about sustainability is you're always on a trajectory of continuous improvement. So you're absolutely never done. And I've been with Brown Thomas Arnotts now about 20 months. So we're at an early stage, but we're moving fast and we're very committed to that continuous improvement. So I think some of the things that we'd really like to get behind, and while online is a big focus, is packaging always needs to be improved, and the more we buy, you have this constant dilemma in retail that you have to make sure that the product isn't damaged, but you want to give it to the customer in the lowest impact packaging, and also that it still is beautifully presented and is a lovely experience. So we're constantly in that balancing act, and we have a lot more that we want to do in that space. We also introduced last year these gorgeous reusable carrier bags. So they're made from recycled plastic bottles. And the interesting thing I think everybody will recognize is that with particularly the Brown Thomas bag, everybody loves it. It's part of the whole experience of shopping in Brown Thomas. So what we wanted to do was not in any way change that. So we introduced a reusable version that's you can take home with you, but also to from an environmental perspective as well. So we're looking now. They've been a real success. We introduced them first of all in homewares, and we want to bring those across all the other categories in different sizes and so forth. So it's like your gorgeous Brown Thomas iconic bag, even better if you want a reusable one.
That's fantastic, and that's no mean feat, because you're right, people have an attachment to that bag, and if you changed it or took it from them, there would be war.
So we're not changing it, don't worry. It's just reusable if that's important to you, and it's important to us that.
It's great as well that, even in terms of the packaging, like you were saying, there has been, I think definitely there's been kind of a mind shift, whereas like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, if people had gotten something in a cardboard package, no matter how beautiful it was, people would have felt a bit strange about it. Whereas I think now that is kind of a new luxury for people, is for it to be completely recyclable. And it's all, I guess, big stores like Arnott's and Brown Thomas and others who take those steps kind of pave the way for other companies to do the same. And I think when you have someone like you implementing those big things, it gives people permission, and it also maybe forces their hand a little bit. So it's just a great example to be setting for everyone in Ireland, and showing that it can be done and it can still be premium, because at the end of the day, when people shop in Brown Thomas, they want that premium experience. And I think that's one of the best things. If you can give people the premium luxury items and experience that they want, while also having it be totally green, that's like the dream scenario. That's awesome.
Absolutely, yeah. I totally agree with that. Yeah. And the other thing I think that's going to be really important to us when the stores reopen is carbon. So we did a fantastic exercise in the last couple of months. We had already reduced our carbon emissions across our stores, all our store estate, by 20%, but we recalculated what our reduction should be in line with science-based targets. And if people aren't familiar with that, what science-based targets are what a business needs to do to reduce its carbon emissions to make sure that they do their part to keep, in our case, Ireland, but also the world within a 1.5 degree temperature rise. So it's basically what the science says you really should be doing. So we, between 2020 and 2030, will reduce our carbon by a further 50% plus. So we have a big 10-year plan of energy saving investments. Renewables are included in that. So, you know, the use of sort of solar voltaic panels on roof systems and things like that. So that's a big part of our vision for the future as well in terms of running the stores.
Now that you've brought up carbon and we've been kind of having a little science chat, that's a perfect segue into a couple of questions that I have about your book, Valuing Natural Capital, which is a fantastic read. And for anyone who's really nerdy about this stuff, you've got to go and read it. It's not too long, but it's really, really fascinating. And I really want to talk to you about a couple of theories in that maybe people won't have heard of. I know I certainly hadn't been well read in it, but you talk a lot about how the world is a bank. Our natural resources have all been in there, but we've just been withdrawing them and not replenishing. And you talk a lot about how we need to start putting a monetary value on the natural resources of the world so that people appreciate them and use them in a different way, because they won't be around forever. They are disappearing. Can you talk to people? I mean, I've done a very dumbed down version of it, but can you talk a little bit about those theories and why it's important that we start seeing those natural resources in a different way?
Yeah, it's so the book is Valuing Natural Capital, and I wrote it in 2015, and I had the privilege to run an initiative for the Prince of Wales called the Natural Capital Coalition, and it was one of the first sort of collaborations for the financial services sector and the investing sector around sustainable finance and this whole issue, as you say, of natural capital. And it's a complicated issue, and I thought, well, I'll try and cut through that complexity with this book and give a 101 to this topic, because I do feel it's incredibly important. So it's to explain the concept. I think we all get financial capital, you know, profit and loss accounts, and having to submit everything from your taxes through to businesses submit annual reports. But when you look at nature, you know, nature's capital gives us things like fresh water, the ability to take in greenhouse gas emissions and keep the climate stable, you know, rich forests and biodiversity, fish stocks in the ocean, gives us all these things. But in our capitalist markets, we do not put an economic value on those. And unfortunately, over the years, that's been one of the features behind us degrading all those fantastic natural capital aspects that I just described. And you know, when you look today, we use the equivalent of 1.5 planets in terms of our consumption, and also how much pollution and waste and so forth we all put out as a species. So that is an untenable solution. And as you say, the Bank of Natural Capital is really overdrawn. So I'm not suggesting for a moment that it's right to monetize these things, because you know, nature is priceless. However, the whole idea is that in a capital market, if you include the value of these things, and you have to include it, that means you won't degrade it. So if you truly have to pay for it. And when people talk about the green economy, which is a big focus now of government policies, and the introduction of things like carbon taxes and regulation, it's about trying to fix what effectively at the moment is a market failure, that we don't cost these things in. So, you know, in Ireland, for example, the carbon tax is about 20 euros a ton of carbon at the moment. You know, the scientists would estimate it should be around 200 to really take into account the impacts of putting out carbon into the atmosphere. So if we can have those financial measures that drive that change and reflect those impacts, that would be an amazing next step. And I think another way to think about it is the value of having things like clean air, clean water, a stable climate is estimated to be about $20 trillion value to the world economy every year. So that's massive. And if Mother Nature actually sent us that invoice, we'd all be in trouble, because think of that taken straight off the value of businesses and stock markets and all that kind of thing. So it's well worth our investment as a species, and for businesses and investors in the financial sector to really start to take that into account. And hopefully with the recovery post-COVID-19, there's a lot of discussion going on about building in that kind of thinking and having it as, you know, just a basic thing that has to be included into the future. So it's interesting that the topic of natural capital is starting to get more airtime post-COVID-19.
Yeah, and it is quite complex, but yeah, you have broken it down really well in the book, and I loved you included some case studies which I thought were fascinating, and some really good ones in there. But I mean, the overall overriding consensus was that any investments that companies made in, you know, improving themselves in terms of how green they are was going to pay off tenfold. So it is something that people need to do and invest in now. What would the world look like if everyone put the right costs on carbon and water and clean air? It would just be a totally different planet, I imagine.
Yeah, it would. I think what we'd find is that we would have abundant sources of fresh water rather than, I mean, so much of the world is in drought. We would not have an unstable climate, which the cost of things like erratic weather and, you know, all of this is just colossal. We wouldn't have that cost. You know, we'd have not you know, running out of fish stocks in the oceans and bleaching our coral and, you know, all these things. We basically just have nature to enjoy. But to do that, we need to preserve it. And yeah, let's watch that space, I guess.
You're so passionate and you've, again, had so much experience, but I suppose I shouldn't be asking you this 20 minutes into our chat, but what started you on this journey? Where did it all begin for you?
Well, for me, I don't sound Irish, I know, but I am Irish, and I was raised in New York until I was 16. But I did my first degree here in UCD, and I did science, and that sort of opened up my mind to the interaction of humans and the natural world. So it was the first thing. And then my first job was with Accenture. I moved to London, and at that stage, I got the opportunity to work with some companies on their assessments of their impact on the environment. It was a very early stage, but it piqued my interest. And at the same time, the hole in the ozone layer was the big problem on the planet at that stage when I started my career, which really interestingly we've solved. So that always gives me hope. So I moved on from Accenture and I went and I did a master's at Imperial College London in environmental science. And that was a game changer because I actually really learned what all this was about, or at least started to. And yeah, that I've spent my career since then working across business and governments for the last 20 years in lots of interesting places in the world on this particular topic, and it's been a privilege. And I feel like I'm a lifelong learner. I'm continuing to learn, and it's really interesting. It's a very dynamic career choice to be in.
You must be constantly reading reports, studies, case studies. It's really full on. So after all of that training and working in Accenture, I know that you list Walmart and Nike as two of the places that you worked. I would love to know what you learned working at those enormous companies, like really huge.
Yeah, my experience with them was they were very innovative, and it's a number of years years ago I worked with them. So they were very interested to become early adopters on this whole area of sustainable products. And I went back while I was working and I did a PhD on sustainable products in about 2005. And at that point, this whole area that we were talking about earlier on about sustainable products, it wasn't really a big issue and it was fairly new. So hence I looked at it and the impacts across supply chains and all of that. So it was after that that you know, this was of interest to those sorts of companies that over 10 years ago were starting to look at this. So, you know, when you think of Nike, whether it's sportswear or whether it's footwear, you know, there's so many materials in their products. There's very complicated supply chains behind them. A lot of my work was working with them to actually look at new innovative low impact materials. How do you make sure labor and environmental issues are properly managed and truly properly managed in supply chains and so forth. So I learned a huge amount. And similar with Walmart. I mean, when I worked with them, they were the biggest company on the planet. So, you know, phenomenal amount of learning and a privilege to work with them.
There must be something great about working with a company of that size because there's great resources, and I would imagine that once they commit to something, it's on the table, and they kind of pursue it. And I mean, Walmart has an amazing record, so it must have been great to be working with companies at that stage when, as you say, it was really early doors for that kind of thing. I'm sure you've carried so much of that experience with you to what you're doing now. Along that journey, and even working with the Crown Alliance as well, did you have any really great mentors who helped you? I think that's something that sometimes in this field it's really hard to find, because there's not a lot of people who are maybe older, more experienced. So were there people who helped you along the way and who you took inspiration from?
Definitely. And I think it doesn't always happen in jobs throughout a career that maybe your boss is somebody who either inspires you or you get along really well with, that you can learn some personal and professional evolution. But I did have a couple of experiences in that, with that in my career, and that's been fantastic. And I've really tried to learn from those. But I have to say, when I was working for the Prince of Wales, I have such respect for him. And he is, in my experience, such a nice, normal human being, and somebody who is so invested in improving a lot of the environmental challenges and has done so much to really try and advance that. He has been a great inspiration as well. And again, a real privilege to work for him and his charities.
That's fabulous. In terms of all that learning, and then I know we've touched on it a little bit, but when you are here now in Ireland and you've just gone through the general election and now we're in the middle of this pandemic, what are the kind of policies that you're hoping can be made here? Sometimes, you know, when you're voting for your local TD, I think it's hard to actually know what you want to ask them for in terms of the kind of changes that they should be making to government policies. So for anyone who's listening, what are the kind of things that you would love to see implemented here and then more globally?
So I think here in Ireland, I think we have every opportunity. We're an amazing country with an amazing people who are educated and spirited. And I think with climate change, you know, the Climate Action Plan has set some really great targets. We're supposed to be net carbon neutral by 2050. We're supposed to have about 70% renewable energy powering Ireland by 2030. All those targets are fantastic. What I would say to the policymakers and the government that's being put together at the moment, what they have to do is move really fast to put the measures in place to actually deliver those. Because when you look at our carbon emissions at the moment, we don't meet our targets. We pay huge sums of money to the European Commission because we don't meet them. So, you know, across agriculture, across transport, across our building and our housing stock, all of these things are things that we know the solutions. They're constantly talked about, and we have some great politicians here and wonderful leaders and scientists here. We know the answers. We need to move fast, and we need to take a leadership position on it. And we can absolutely do that in Europe, and we have other countries not of a dissimilar size to Ireland that also take a leadership role. So I think we should absolutely look to do that. And it's a massive missed opportunity if we don't do that.
I love the idea of becoming leaders in it. I think that would be amazing. We've been leaders in so many other topics in the world when it comes to gay marriage, marriage equality, and other things. So it would be incredible if we became the leaders in a small country becoming more eco-friendly and green and carbon neutral and all those good things. That's a lovely positive message for people to think about. In terms of your own preference, obviously you do all this great big work out in the world, but when it comes to you, what are some of your favorite products and fashion labels and the things that bring you joy, especially at the moment, the things that are bringing you joy, that you just love, your go-tos?
Well, I'll tell you at the moment, with all the excessive hand washing, I've been a little bit extravagant. And before things shut down, I was privileged to be able to buy in Arnotts. We had a beautiful pop-up from Max Benjamin, beautiful Irish company who I love, and I've been out in their facility in Wexford, which is just gorgeous, and everything is done so appropriately. But they are producing a beautiful palm oil-free soap. So it's a really nice soap to wash your hands with, given we are doing it so much at the moment. They're a little bit dry still, but of any soap, it's done a good job. So that's one I love. I think all of my choices at this point in my life are absolutely informed by sustainability. you won't see anything in terms of my makeup and beauty that is not cruelty-free. There's some products I absolutely love that are really innovating on sustainability. Sunday Riley's one of those. I think I'm a big fan of Clarins and their skincare. I think they have been really innovative and credible on their approach to sustainability long before anybody was talking about it. So they're just kind of some of my personal choices. And then on the fashion side of things, a big fan of Ghani, as you can see. I love Samso and Samso. They're doing some amazing things with low impact fashion. Acne Studios, when I splurge a little bit, I love their fashion. And again, loads of low impact materials, low impact production processes. Veja shoes, I have quite a number of those trainers. So yeah, they're just some of my examples. A little bit of Stella McCartney. She's done some real innovations trying to move away from leather, because of course animal welfare is so important to her, but moving beyond plastic alternatives as well. So I've been really interested to support some of those with some of the recent handbags that she has.
I love some of the products that she uses. I'm trying to think of the companies. She uses a couple of companies, one of which grows their leather, which is incredible.
So
It's so
yeah, this
exciting.
is this mushroom leather, yeah, that she's calling it vegan leather, yeah. And we have a couple of those handbags. They're on the sustainable edit at the moment, and they're super cool and beautiful looking. And it's really soft, actually. It's softer than you might feel a leather is. So it's actually a beautiful product. So, and they've invested a lot to innovate in that space. So I always like to support companies like that who are taking a lead. Patagonia is a little bit like that too. They've taken a lead for years, and I like to support them as well.
Yeah, and you include a really great case study again in the book about Patagonia and how they're helping basically not only cancel out the damage they're doing, but actually improve the grasslands that they use for some of their products too, which is so inspiring. It's just awesome. Dorothy, I could talk to you all day, but I know I've taken so much of your time already, but I just want to thank you so much. For anyone who's watching, I guess they can look at the sustainable edits if they kind of want to keep up with what you're doing. And you have a great website too, and check out your book. And thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you, Jo. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.